My name is Michael Garret. Until a few months ago, I was just an ordinary guy, a 25-year-old accountant living in Boston. But then, my life turned extraordinarily dark into the supernatural realm. If you had told me vampires existed, I would have laughed in your face. But I know better now. They are all too real, and I've got the scars to prove it. It started with the disappearance of my little sister, Janie. One day, she just vanished without a trace from her apartment. No signs of a struggle or break-in. She was just gone, like she had evaporated into thin air. As the eldest of 3 siblings, I felt responsible for discovering what happened to her. My searches led me to a private investigator named Callahan, a grizzled ex-cop who had dealt with his fair share of strange cases over the years. When I hired him, I never could have imagined where the trail would take us, to the godforsaken town of Ravenwood, tucked away in the mountains of western Massachusetts. "I got a bad feeling about this place, kid," Callahan muttered as he pulled his truck up to the rusty gates of the Blackmore estate. The towering wrought iron gates were slightly ajar, creaking in the chill night wind. Beyond the gates loomed an enormous Gothic manor of cracked stone, easily centuries old with its weather-worn gargoyles and shattered windows. The entire hilltop estate looked decrepit and abandoned, consumed by the twisted maze of dead trees and underbrush surrounding it. "You sure this is the right place?" I asked, doubt gnawing at me. Records show that this estate belonged to the wealthy Blackmore family, dating back to the 1700s. But they had fallen into ruin over 100 years ago after a series of tragic deaths and disappearances. The place looked frail and lifeless, an ancient haunted relic forgotten by the outside world. But according to Callahan's sources, it was the last known destination of 3 women who had gone missing in recent months under baffling circumstances, including my sister Janie. "I ain't got much choice but to check it out," Callahan grumbled as he climbed out of the truck, his hand resting on the pearl grip of the .44 revolver tucked into his waistband. Ever the cautious former cop, he wasn't taking any chances. I grabbed a baseball bat, an inadequate but reassuring makeshift weapon, from the truck bed. As I fell behind Callahan, the decrepit manor watched us with cold, empty windows like soulless eyes. The faint scent of wood rot and decay hung in the night air. I couldn't fight the prickly feeling of eyes watching our every move from the shadowed tree lines. "Keep it together, kid," Callahan said without looking back, sensing my trepidation. We approached the gaping maw of the manor's entranceway, shattered doors hanging off rusted hinges. A creak of ancient wood came from the bowels of the building, almost like a mournful groan. Callahan froze, his hand inching towards his revolver. We waited in tense silence, but heard nothing more. "After you," Callahan said finally with a curt nod. I swallowed hard and stepped tentatively inside, the rancid smell of decay overwhelming me as I crossed the threshold. Callahan was right behind, his revolver clearing the barrel of its holster. We stood in a once lavish foyer, dust and cobwebs coating everything. Delirious shafts of moonlight filtered through holes in the crumbling ceiling above. Ornate furniture lay overturned amidst debris, a broken chandelier sprawled across the floor. The place looked abandoned, reclaimed by the relentless forces of decay and entropy. "Doesn't seem like anybody's been squatting here for a long while," Callahan mused as we moved forward cautiously. "Then what are we—" I started to ask before a sudden scraping noise made us both jump. It came again, followed by a low, inhuman moan that turned my blood to ice water. Something was lurking here in the shadows after all. "Who's there? Show yourself!" Callahan bellowed, leveling his revolver at a dark hallway adjoining the foyer. A figure shuffled into view from the darkness, a hunched, withered older woman in tattered rags. Her face was a sunken skull-like visage, lips peeled back from crooked fangs, dripping with something darker than spittle. What little hair she had was a tangled white mess, and her eyes glowed with a feral, predatory light. "Oh, God!" I choked out in horror and disgust. This was no ordinary squatter or vagrant. "The ancients welcome you, warm bags of flesh," she rasped in a dry, creaky tone, her tongue slithering over those dagger fangs. Such exquisite aromas to finally grace our decrepit halls again. Suddenly, a blur came hurtling from the hallway behind her. A pale, leering man, mouth split wide in a vicious snarl. Before either Callahan or I could react, he slammed into the old crone, fangs extended toward her withered neck. "No!" She slapped him away with shocking strength, sending him crashing to the floor. She turned to face us, fury contorting her skeletal features. "Our guests are not for you, Vladimir. They will feed the Ancient Ones first." "Mother!" The man groaned as he rose, wiping a trail of blackish blood from his mouth. "We must feast on the fresh meat before it spoils." Callahan reacted with the trained reflexes of his cop days, snapping off 2 thunderous shots from his revolver. The slugs ripped into Vladimir's chest, but he didn't so much as flinch. Instead, a crooked smile spread across his lips as the ragged holes in his flesh began knitting closed. That's when I saw the numerous other figures emerging from the shadows, men, women, and even children, all bearing those same cruel fangs and unnatural pallor. Oh no, this couldn't be real. But it was. Vampires. "Get ready to run, kid," Callahan warned, rage and fear in his voice as he gripped his revolver tighter. That's when they attacked, a wave of hissing, leering horrors exploding towards us. Callahan opened fire, bullets ripping into the onslaught with sickening impact. But there were just too many. A trio of female vampires slammed into me, cruel nails and fangs seeking to pierce my flesh and drink deep. I swung my bat in panicked desperation, shattering one skull in a burst of crimson ruin, but the others quickly overpowered me. I caught a glimpse of Callahan engulfed and torn apart, his body splintering like a rag doll amidst a sea of gnashing fangs and clawing hands. Then something hit me from behind with the force of a sledgehammer, and everything dissolved into pain and blessed nothingness. When I came, I found myself in a dark, damp chamber made of mortared stone. My wrists were shackled to the wall, and my clothes were in shreds, revealing angry bite marks and gouges all over my arms and torso. My head throbbed like a jackhammer, and I tasted the metallic tang of my blood. Memories of the horror flooded back, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I was still alive somehow, but where were the others? Where was Janie? Had we wandered into some nightmare nest of the undead? A low chuckle from the shadows made me snap my head around. Vladimir emerged from the gloom, his pale features twisted in an almost orgasmic leer of cruelty. "Such fear, such exquisite terror wafting from you. I can almost taste it." He inhaled deeply, savouring my panic like a fine wine. Regaining some composure, I tried to match his gaze with defiance. "Where are the others? What did you do to them?" He laughed mockingly. "You mean the old fool and his miserable companions? Dead. All of them dead and drained to sate the hunger of our children." My stomach turned to lead, revulsion churning within me. I had watched Callahan get torn apart, but the others? Dead? Janie! Oh, God! Vladimir seemed to read it all on my face, that vicious smile never wavering. "Yes, your little sister put up quite a struggle before Katerina subdued her. She was such a defiant little thing, full of spark and fury. I do so enjoy breaking spirits like that." Rage boiled up through the fear gripping me. "If you hurt her, I swear to God." "What?" He cut me off with a sneer. "You'll strike me down with that mortal bravado? Your sister's life essence is already flowing through my veins, giving me strength, as is the rest of her pathetic hunting party. I strained against the shackles desperately, but they were firmly set into the ancient stone. Vladimir watched in dark amusement before continuing. Although our newest offspring provides me a unique opportunity. A petite figure stepped into the chamber from behind Vladimir. At first, I didn't recognize the young woman. Her face frozen in an exquisite, doll-like beauty, eyes feral and lips stained crimson from fresh blood. Then she looked up at me with those predatory eyes, and I saw Janie's familiar features twisted by the unholy curse of the undead. My little sister turned into one of these foul creatures of the night. No, I croaked in despair. Janie hissed at me, lips peeling back to reveal elongated blood-stained fangs. Vladimir clapped her shoulder in a perverse parody of paternal pride. Your sibling bond will make her loyalty to me unbreakable. She will be my blessed progeny to carry on my bloodline. He licked his fangs slowly, eyes narrowing in dark hunger. And you will provide her first meal as one of the eternal undead? With a sudden blur of speed, Janie lunged forward, her cold hands clamping around my throat as she bared those wicked fangs. I stared back at her in helpless horror as the vampire that had once been my sweet little sister prepared to drink me dry. Just then, the stone chamber shook with a thunderous explosion of noise and debris. Janie hissed and whirled around as a considerable figure hurtled through the billowing dust clouds. It was like something out of my worst nightmares. A massive wolf-like beast, 10 feet tall with a hideous snarling visage dripping saliva. Its eyes blazed with feral hatred as it towered over Vladimir and Janie. The vampire master threw his head back and laughed at the monstrous intruder. Mikhail, I was wondering when you'd decide to show your misshapen face again. Come to whimper about your lost territory like last time? The beast opened its slavering jaws, and I was shocked when words issued forth in a guttural, inhuman tone. I've come to cleanse this land of your repulsive spawn once and for all. Before Vladimir could react, the wolf creature swatted Janie aside with one colossal arm, her body crashing against the stones. It came at the vampire with earth-shaking speed, raking him with wicked talons that left deep gouges in his torso and face. Vladimir shrieked in rage and agony, peppering the beast with a flurry of claw swipes and kicks that surprisingly staggered the towering monster. He landed one lucky swipe that damn near decapitated the beast, spurting pools of thick black vitae. As the two unholy titans grappled back and forth in a whirlwind of tearing fangs and ripping flesh, I focused all my efforts on the shackles binding me. I pulled and twisted at the rusted metal with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength, feeling them slowly start to give. The wolf finally got its jaws clamped around Vladimir's arm, worrying it like a dog with a bone. The vampire howled, then did something even more insane. He willingly tore off his arm, leaving a stump of bone-shredded muscle. Before the beast could react, he swung that bloody stump in a savage arc, spraying the creature's face with noxious plasma. It recoiled, giving Vladimir an opening to tackle and bear it to the ground, pummeling its grotesque visage repeatedly with those viciously pointed elbows. But the beast was far from done. With one colossal swipe of its massive claws, it disemboweled Vladimir, spilling shredded tendons and black viscera across the chamber floor. The vampire convulsed, his battered form thrashing about as his guts streamed from that horrific wound. In a final act of desperation, Vladimir launched himself at me, gripping my face with that remaining hand, his once handsome features twisted into a rictus of fury. "If I'm to perish," he sputtered through a mouthful of unholy bile, "then you'll join me in eternal oblivion." He pulled me towards his gaping maw of fangs, his ragged throat already working hungrily, when an iron manacle came lashing around his neck, yanking him away. I looked over and saw Janie, still standing but fighting some inner struggle against her vampire curse. "Get away from my brother!" she growled through gritted fangs. With the last vestiges of her humanity flickering, she pulled Vladimir off me and flung him across the chamber, right into the path of the waiting beast. It swatted Vladimir away contemptuously like so much discarded trash, then turned those blazing amber eyes on me. "You there?" It rumbled, stalking forward with heavy footfalls. "Can you fight? Or are you just another meal for the scourge?" I rubbed my chafed wrists as the last manacles clattered to the ground. "I can fight," I stated firmly, resolved not to die here. The beast grunted almost approvingly. "Let's cleanse this place, starting with your corrupted kin over there." I looked over at Janie. She was pulling herself up from the debris, her features becoming more vampiric and feral by the second as the flickers of her humanity faded. Could I bring myself to fight her, to end her unholy existence before it was complete? She was still in there somewhere, but for how much longer? Too many unknowns, too many uncertainties. But one thing was clear. I was caught in an ancient war between two unholy races, and I had to pick a side before they tore me apart. I locked eyes with the wolf beast, feeling the tingle of supernatural energy bristling between us. I gave it the slightest nod. Its maw twisted into the slightest semblance of a savage grin, dagger fangs gleaming. "Welcome to the hunt, mortal." And with that, it pounced toward Janie with a loud feral roar. I barely had a chance to brace myself before the wolf beast collided with Janie in an explosion of shrieks, fangs, and claws. They became a whirlwind of violence, smashing against the stone walls and tearing chunks from the floor and each other with every brutal impact. Crouched low, I scanned the debris-strewn chamber desperately for anything I could use as a weapon. That's when I spotted a jagged piece of rock about the size of a football. I scooped it up, the uneven surface biting into my palm. The combatants crashed back towards me in a tumbling ball of snapping jaws and slashing talons. At the last second, I saw my opening, Janie's writhing body with the beast's crushing weight bearing down. I drew back the jagged stone and threw it with every ounce of strength, aiming right for her temple. The makeshift bludgeon struck true with a sickening crunch of shattered bone and splattered blood. Janie went limp, spraying blackish vitae as the beast pinned her down. For a split second, I saw her eyes, two pools of frightened innocence amidst that ruined vampiric face. Then the light faded, and she was no more. My sister was dead, permanently dead this time. I sank to my knees in stunned disbelief, unable to accept it. A rasping scoff snapped my head around. Vladimir was still alive somehow, slumped against the far wall with that battered, dislocated body. That mouth twisted into a mocking grin, fangs stained obsidian. "Well done, boy. You've taken your first step into our dark world." "Silence, blasphemous one!" The beast pounded towards him, shaking the very foundations. Vladimir just sneered, so righteously indignant as always, mongrel. Like the night we clashed in the old village over that witch's whelp. You couldn't save her soul then, and you won't be saving this wretch's. He jerked his head towards me. "I've drunk from older bloodlines than yours, Mikhail. That precious mortal essence is already turning his spirit black as pitch." A cold knot twisted in my gut at Vladimir's vile insinuations. I felt the beast's molten glare upon me and slowly turned to face the towering monster. Is what he says true? Am I... Mikhail's eyes narrowed to slits. There are many shades to the supernatural human, and just as many paths to ruin or salvation if one possesses the will to choose. To my shock, its grotesque visage trembled and shifted like heated wax, the twisted features melting and reshaping until a human man stood before me. He looked ancient with a wizened face and long iron grey hair, yet he possessed penetrating eyes that revealed his inhuman power. I did not save you from that spawn's corruption to damn you as one of his ilk." The man's voice still rumbled with that same feral power as before. "I can yet guide you through the trials to come and make you anew as one of my sacred brethren, a Lernahal, guardian of the mortal realm." I stared at him, and it all came crashing down on me. Vampires, ancient supernatural orders, all of it was horrifyingly, undeniably real. "But why me?" I asked at last. "Why choose me to join this war?" "Because you have the strength of spirit required to stand against the swelling darkness?" The creature that was once Mikhail grasped me by the shoulders with intense eyes. "I could sense it in you from the moment I detected that unholy coven's foul presence in these woods and tracked you to their nest. Your soul burned with defiance in the face of damnation, and that is what will sustain you." "Go ahead and indoctrinate the fool, beast," Vladimir coughed through a mouthful of blackened bile. The seed of hunger has already taken root within his mortal shell. I marked him myself. His footsteps are set upon the blackened path whether he accepts it. Mikhail's lip curled back hatefully at the disabled vampire's hissed words. "Then you shall witness his defiance as I induct him into this night's sacred rites. By the fallen moon, a new warrior for the light shall be forged." I felt cold sweat trickle down the back of my neck. This was happening, whether I fully understood it yet or not. The ultimate darkness had bled into my world, corrupting Janie and many others. And now, this being Mikhail offered me the chance to fight back against it all. But at what cost? Could I turn my back on my humanity forever? Before I could decide, Vladimir lurched upright with a bubbling cry. His shredded form was shifting, bones crunching, and tendons re-knitting in a sick blasphemy. With each passing moment, his body elongated and swelled with grotesque muscle masses and bony spurs. His jaw cracked open inhumanly wide to accommodate a mass of fangs erupting from his gums. "Then take heart, mongrel. I shall rip out his tainted soul myself before your ritual is complete," he bellowed in a voice that seemed to fracture the very air. The newborn monster surged forward, all 16 feet of sinewy, death-dealing horror barreling down on us. I froze in abject terror, bracing for certain oblivion. But Mikhail moved with equal swiftness, thrusting his arms outward and unleashing a torrent of eldritch flames that enveloped Vladimir's hulking form. The vampire beast recoiled, covered in crackling emerald fire that consumed his regenerating flesh like napalm. It roared in anguished fury, staggering madly as malt skin and ichor rained down to hiss and spit across the chamber. Mikhail stalked forward, the fires burning in his hollowed eyes reflecting the supernatural inferno consuming Vladimir. His features blurred and shifted once more into the hulking shape of the wolf monster. His maw split wide as he let loose a loud call that seemed to summon the very primordial forces of nature itself. "Make your choice, mortal!" the beast man roared over the din of Vladimir's dying shrieks. He extended a clawed hand to me, for the twilight battle is only just beginning. So there I stood amid the hellish conflagration and the vampire abomination's death throes. On one side, eternal darkness, to damn my soul and become a cursed thing of nightmare forevermore. On the other, I want to shed my humanity and bind myself to the service of those primal guardians standing vigil against the supernatural shadow world. I looked down at my hands, still stained with Janie's immortal essence. Her death would not be meaningless. I had to press on and fight. With a grim nod, I clasped the scaled paw of the inhuman horror before me. The chamber walls shuddered and cracked as its eldritch flames engulfed us in a swirling vortex. I felt a scorching eruption of agony scourge every nerve ending as the transmutation rites took hold. And in that endless abyss of torment, I surrendered my soul to become something more than human. An instrument of primal justice forged to purge the blighting darkness from this world. no matter the grave cost. The searing agony consumed me, ripping my very being asunder and reforging it in purifying fires of transformation. I could feel my mortal shell being remade into something unnatural, every fibre of muscle and sinew enhanced beyond human boundaries. My vision blazed with eldritch energies as the rites flooded my consciousness, shattering my frail psyche to make room for an awakening of power and mysteries long forgotten by the modern world. Lost primordial secrets bled into the tattered remnants of my mind like razors. The names of ancient orders and extinct spirit realms, forbidden lore on the hierarchy of unholy predators lurking beyond our reality's veil. And through it all raged the insatiable, all-consuming hunger. A yawning maw of eternal ravenous desire, an endless abyssal thirst that could never be sated by mere mortal sustenance. I could taste the rich primal essence of life calling to me, a tempting crimson ocean that also held the dire risk of total corruption and consummate damnation if that thirst was allowed to rule me unchecked. After an eternity burning in that crucible of unholy resurrection, my new form solidified, taking the expected hybrid shape of man and lupine beast, the better to straddle both the material and ethereal realms. My muscles bulged with a predator's coiled power, and my claws and fangs elongated into rending talons for shredding the unholy flesh of my eternal foes. And my newly sharpened senses could detect the faintest spectral presence of the supernatural lurking just beyond the normal plane. I unsteadily rose from the scorched and fissured chamber floor, every muscle still crackling with the dissipating fires of metamorphosis. My first laboured breaths drew in the charred odour of vampire remains, all that was left of the once fearsome Vladimir after the immolating rites were through with him. Mikhail stood watching me impassively, his towering wolfen form seemingly unperturbed by the devastation surrounding us. He reached out with one massive paw, and I instinctively flinched before feeling his telekinetic presence brush against my newly birthed psyche. "Calm yourself, Varric," his voice rumbled in my mind. "There is still a long path ahead to fully honing your spiritual essence and arcane gifts, but the Crucible has forever transformed you into one of the Lair Nahal, a hunting warrior tasked with the sacred duty of culling the unholy scourge wherever it arises." I looked at my bestial body with disgust, awe, and uncertainty. So much felt foreign, yet right somehow, like I had been born anew into my actual feral state after being confined in that old, ill-fitting human husk for too long. My gaze fell upon the tatters of my clothing scattered amidst the debris, remnants of the life and existence I had literally burned away. Flashes of memory flickered, tugging at whatever tattered remnants of my past self still clung on in the depths of my reforged spirit. "Janie, my sister," I rasped, my new vocal cords still stiff and unfamiliar. "I couldn't save her. They turned her." The image of her once sweet, innocent face, twisted into that of a soulless vampiric fiend, caused a white-hot flash of fury to course through me. I let out an anguished howl as the newborn beast within reared up, claws splayed and fangs bared in rage. I felt the chamber and all material reality around me start to distort and shudder with barely contained forces, as if my torrent of emotion alone could rip the fabric of the physical world itself. A sudden psionic battering slammed into me, Mikhail's powerful mind clamping down metaphysical shackles around my unleashed energies and forcing me back under control. I slumped, gasping, inwardly stunned by the rampant destruction I'd nearly wrought. "In time, neophyte," the ancient lichen growled aloud and telepathically. "You must learn to fully master your heightened spiritual state, lest the hunger consumes your soul as it has for countless others of our failed kin." His piercing gaze bore into me with solemn finality. The path before us is forever littered with hardship and sacrifice, for the accursed Vrikalaten breed unceasingly to slake their perverse hunger for the innocent. There will be many more loved ones whose souls we cannot save before the ultimate reckoning comes. I shuddered convulsively, the enormity of the new demonic reality crashing upon me in waves. So this was my new existence, an immortal warrior locked in perpetual conflict with the ravenous undead for the salvation of the mortal realm? How many more would I be doomed to watch succumb to the vampire's fangs and be forever lost? Michael seemed to sense my turmoil, his tone softening the slightest degree. But on this night, you have taken your first defiant steps upon the sacred path forged by your predecessors since immemorial. And that choice must continue burning within you, hot as the cleansing fires, never to surrender your light to the swelling darkness. With surprising tenderness, the ancient lichen's claws gripped my shoulder as he crouched low to look me in the eyes. For if that eternal flame within you fails, if your spirit falters even once, then the never night descends, and all the realms of existence are doomed. I nodded solemnly, feeling the weight of Michael's words resonate through my newly reforged soul. The gravity of my rebirth into this unholy order of demonic huntsmen was almost too much for my transfigured mind to process fully. But one certainty rang clear. There could be no looking back from the path I had irrevocably set foot upon this night. With a grunt, the ancient lichen turned and started loping towards the shattered remnants of the chamber's entrance. Come, we must quit this wretched place at once, before the Vrikalaka's spawn scent the ashes of their kin's demise and descend upon us. I glance at the blasted ruins of the vampire's unhallowed lair. Lingering psychic impressions of the horrors that had transpired here assaulted my heightened senses like spectral aftershocks. The butchered remains of the vampire coven's mortal victims, Janie's corrupted resurrection, my shattering metamorphosis. The spiritual scarring would never fully heal. But then, a new foreign sensation washed over me, a spectral itch at the back of my consciousness. I detected the faintest traces of some other profane presence still lurking in this damned place, despite Michael's purifying rites. I instinctively inhaled deeply through my new bestial maw and caught the slightest whiff of a sweet, unholy musk lingering amid the charnel ashes and ozone. Michael stopped and cocked an ear back towards me, also detecting my pause. "What is it, pup? Do you sense something amiss?" I nodded slowly, allowing my enhanced senses to analyze the lingering miasma comprehensively. It carried the faintest hint of long-decayed organic matter fused with something far more disturbing. The dry mustiness of turned earth and damp spores, almost like the fragrance unleashed when prying open a long-sealed and defiled sepulchre. "Undying ones!" I rumbled, feeling the first stirrings of the newborn hunter's instincts arcing through my heightened psyche. Something far fouler than even these parasitic scourge lairs below, slumbering and foul. Michael's muzzle wrinkled in a feral snarl, as his preternatural senses no doubt rendered the same grim conclusions as mine. "Zava!" he growled, every syllable dripping with the ancient huntsman's fury. The cursed death tyrants still cling to their blasphemous existences after untold ages. Of course, their profane energies would be drawn to rotting in the shadows of any necrotic blight like this one. I knew that dreadful name from the fragments of occult lore violently imparted to me during the rebirthing rites, the Zava, unholy sovereigns of the unliving tyrant kin. Vampiric abominations from the blackest pits of prehistory transcended into something far more insidious than their lesser kin through sacrifices of the damned and perversions of the primal sorceries. If the Vrikalakas were a virulent strain of supernatural parasites infecting the lands of the living, then the Zava was the source of the primordial plague itself, festering bone lords waging eternal war to remake all creation as an extension of their vile necropolis. "Can they be destroyed?" I asked, fangs gnashing hungrily at the prospect of facing such an ancient evil head-on. "Or are they just shades anchored to this accursed place?" "Overconfident whelp!" Mikhail growled in my mind, his tail lashing. Even in the most dilapidated state of their waxing, the Zava command profane sorceries that could unravel your spirit into the primordial ether with a cursory effort. And this week is no mere spectral lava to be snuffed out so blithely. He reared his full towering height, hackles raised as baleful energy shimmered from his eyes. No, this stench heralds the diseased presence of a true Zava overlord, one of their decadent, deathless aristocracy waking from its eon-spanned quiescence to begin marshalling its unholy hordes once more. A fresh contagion of putrescence aiming to spread from this site like a plague lesion. The ancient lichen threw his head back and released a reverberating howl that shook the very foundations of the accursed manor. All around us, the shadows seemed to warp and twist inwards, as if the entire dilapidated structure was peeling away from the material plane like a scab from some spirit wound. Suddenly, with a thunderous eruption of dust and crumbling stone, the floor directly beneath us gave way, causing us both to plunge with bone-jarring force down a sheer shaft of utter Stygian blackness amidst a torrent of rubble and broken masonry. My newly bestial form twisted with preternatural agility to right itself against the rocketing downdraft. Potent psychic senses expanded outwards, divining the horrors lurking in the lightless rifts below before my sharpened night vision kicked in. With a stomach-lurching impact, I struck the bottom of the sundered passage with bone-jarring force. Mikhail slammed to the ground beside me in an explosion of dust and pulverized rock, only moments later, his trionic bulk cratering the solid basalt. I surged upright, claws extended as my predatory instincts took over, just as the first shambling shapes emerged from the impenetrable gloom surrounding us. High-pitched keening wails reverberated from their inhumanly gaping maws like the communal lament of the soulless and irredeemably damned. Dozens, scores of rotting, twisted forms clad in tattered funerary garb oozed from the cracks of the underground chamber, their balefully glowing eye sockets fixing upon us with rapacious hunger. As desiccated limbs and leering skull faces were cast into stark relief by some unseen spectral radiance pulsing at the cavern's core, I felt my regenerated heart skip with instinctual terror. These mangled, profane horrors were not mere revenants or Vrikir foot soldiers. No, they were something far worse. Kin of the true undying overlords said to have commanded the pits of blasphemous necromancy and death worship since time immemorial, the literal elite foot soldiers and banner lords from the grotesque God King's legions. Mikhail's bestial voice rumbled caustically in my mind. "Now, do you grasp the dire straits we find ourselves in, pup? I fear we've barged unannounced into the catacombs throne hall of a full-blooded Zava death regent." Blazing pyres of eldritch energy flared to unnatural life in the ancient hunter's palms as he braced himself.
"And if we cannot cut down the waking master swiftly, then the night eternal shall befall every living realm before the next moon rises." With a sickening crack, the score of rotted Zava fodder lining the chamber sloughed and convulsed, shedding the last of their archaic trappings to reveal their actual wretched forms.
They erupted vertically in grotesque masses of pallid scar tissue veined with bioluminescent rot. Arms became pulsing clusters of whiplash tendrils tipped with hooked bone spurs. Jaws unhinged and bestial masks split open to reveal rows of knife-edged fangs suspended within gaping maws wide enough to swallow a man whole, and their hulking spined silhouettes grew increasingly dense and opaque as if the human stuff composing their unholy husks were steadily rearranging into more lethally honed shapes by an unnatural sentience beyond mortal comprehension. Those baleful orbs of lunar fire flashed across the writhing congregation as a booming voice reverberated from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Intruders, your living flesh giveth off such delirious fragrances!" It gurgled and echoed with the cloying reek of 1,000 festered sepulchres. Yes, flesh is hunger-red for, to feed the rebirth, the Massisterus gloriousus. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and share your scary encounters. Also, consider joining the Fear Frequencies community for exclusive perks and early access to new content. Your support helps us create even more thrilling stories. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider leaving a super thanks.